What's up, everybody? Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. My name is Michael Paquette. I'm going to show you two things. So grab a pen and paper, grab your notepad, grab your phone for your notes, and start taking notes because I'm going to show you two things. Number one, I'm going to show you how I build my tracks. That's the biggest question that I get is what do I do when I build my tracks? How do I have such freedom and flexibility when I play tracks? So I'm going to show you what I do, and I'll tell you the pros and cons of it. And the second thing I'm going to do is show you other options of doing it and the pros and cons to that. You get to decide what's best for you. That's the beauty about Ableton is there's a million ways to do one thing. So let's dive right in. Here's what you'll see whether you get tracks from multitracks.com or any other websites that deliver multi-track stems. They'll probably give it to you in this kind of format. With drums being first, and then any percussion, bass, all the guitars, all the keys, and then all the background vocals. Now, this is a song that I have already built, so I'm going to save some time, but I'll still show you the process. So the first thing that I do is I make sure that everything is labeled, everything is color-coded, the same color, because I'm a visual person. I like to see order and organization within my session. The last thing I want to do is guess what song that is. So I always color code even in my session when I build it. So this is the first step. Once everything is color coded and labeled, now I take everything that I play live and I put it up at the top. Everything else is at the bottom. So drums are played live, bass, acoustic, guitar, main keys. That is all brought down to the bottom. All of this stuff here, I don't need. So the vocals all the way up to drums, I'm gonna deactivate. The reason why I deactivate is because if I ever need something for either reference or for rehearsal, let's say your drummer's late, because drummers happen to be late the majority of the time. Just kidding, I love drummers. But let's say the drummer is late for downbeat and you need to run the first song. You highlight drums, you press 0 to activate or deactivate any clip, and then you have drums ready to go. So for now, we'll deactivate. Then I put everything into a group. I label this group what this song is. This is Where Can I Go? In the key of E flat at 74 BPM. Now I put 74.00 BPM because occasionally, just for organization's sake in files, there's going to be 74.5. So that I'll do 74.50 BPM, and it just makes things a little more organized. Moving on. So now that I have this folder collapsible to group, when I save it, this is only done once, and then I drag it into my session for the set list. So I'm gonna need a click, I'm gonna need a guide, and I'm gonna need markers. What I mean by markers is each section of the song I want to visually see as it plays in my session for the weekend. This is how I build it. Now, when you get a multi-track session, you'll probably have locators like count in and then intro, verse, chorus. They'll be labeled, you know, all that kind of stuff. So because this was an unreleased song at the time, I had to build it myself. So I'm just going to drag what I had in and show you how I did that. Now, this is the complete version of a saved song. So this is what we want to do to get there. Notice there's some extra audio that's, you know, at the end there. I want it all to end at the same time, because when I put it in the session, I want to make sure that everything is lined up correctly and it's the same tempo and all of that. So this guide track you'll usually get whenever you get things from multitracks.com or Loop Community or other places that provide a guide track. Otherwise, you'll have to make it yourself. But I always have guide, click, and markers outside of the group folder. And I renamed the guide track just so I can visually see the name of the song and the key of the song. That's that. Now I use a MIDI click, and you can see that there's different types of clicks. I'll just solo this so you can hear. So this is the click that I default always go to. You'll hear it in my videos. There's other ones. Really depends on what you want. Okay, I like the classic one. You have more options to raise the eighth notes or just quarter notes. You can actually go inside the MIDI clip here. You can delete the eighth notes if you want to. The options are there for you. That's why I use the MIDI click. Using audio click tracks is perfectly fine as well. Okay, so what are these markers? You notice I don't have the flags like multi-tracks would do. I do put these in at the end of my session. That's for a different video that I'll share with you guys, like to make a full session. But this is just the format of one song. So I'm gonna delete that. Now, how did I create these markers and why are they color-coded? So I create a new MIDI track, not an audio track. So if you press Command-T, it makes an audio track. If you press Command-Shift-T, it makes a MIDI track. Make sure that you learn all of your shortcuts. It will save you lots of time, I promise you. Okay, let's move on. So how do I make these markers? Simply highlight a section wherever the count in is.
1, 2, intro, 2, 3,
Intro
4.
starts here. So for this section here, Command-Shift-M or right-click and go to Insert Empty MIDI Clip. Command-Shift-M. Then I can right-click and rename or Command-R and rename that count off. Now I color code this. There's no musical thing here, so I gray it out. And then I know that this section here is the intro. You'll have to figure that out on your songs, whatever it is. Obviously, the locators will make it easy for you to see. Command-Shift-M, rename to intro. Now, I usually make this bright purple for all my musical interludes, intros, outros, instrumentals, tags. They're all purple. That's just the color that I've done it. You can do whatever color you want. Then the verse is this section here. Command-Shift-M, rename verse 1, color code green. Another thing you can do if you really want to is just duplicate this. So Command-D, and then, you know, whatever. You can just go in here, split these, cut that. I'm just giving you options here. Rename, go to orange. Okay. You see how quickly this can be done. I can extend this. Okay. Now, it's all up to you what you want to do. So if you want to highlight, again, so on and so forth. So that's how I make the MIDI markers here until it's all the way to the end. Basically, this is it. Okay. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to explain to you. For MIDI, you can very, very quickly join MIDI by selecting all this audio here and consolidating everything. You see how there's two separate clicks here? I just want one name. So Command-J, and it joins everything together. That's the shortcut to consolidate, Command-J. For audio, it's going to be different. It has to bounce and render that audio together. So you can still use the Command-J shortcut. It's going to take a minute to do. This is the completed look that I have. But what about if I have it in a session and I want to change the key or I want to change the tempo? You can always do that within Ableton, but there's a couple of rules that you have to follow. Number one, understand warping. Very, very big deal to understand warping. If you don't understand warping, it can mess your whole session up. I have fixed so many, countless sessions from people not understanding why are my tracks messed up, how come they're just out of whack, it's not synced up to the click. It's most likely because they have the warping messed up. Let me give you an example. MIDI always follows Ableton session click. So watch this. If I raise this up, the MIDI will stay the same. So it's at 96 right now, but what did it do to the audio? It stretched it out. This is why I always end it at the same length to C, because when the session is at the right tempo, at 74, it's all lined up. Now I know that that will be perfect and in sync. But if for some reason the session is at a different tempo, it will not sync up to the end. That's a bad sign. So listen to this really quick.
1, 2, intro, 2, 3, 4.
The intro should have started there. The count-in was right. Let's look into these settings here. If I click the guide, I go down here to audio and it's warped. That means that it will sync up to the session at whatever tempo the session is in. But these, let's click on loop, it is not warped. Watch. Not warped. But if I do warp it, it's warped at this current BPM at 82. That's not what we want. We always want to warp it at the tempo that it is. Let's undo that warp and let's bring this session back down to 74. Everything is lined up. This is warped. Now let's warp everything else. Warp. Okay, so now that everything is warped, I've sped up the Ableton session. It did not extend the audio. Let's see how it sounds.
1, 2, intro, 2, 3, 4.
Everything seems to be in time. Let's bring it back to 74, the original.
1, 2.
Guy doesn't sound distorted,
Intro,
which is a good thing.
2, 3, 4.
Still good to go. Now I can always change the key as well. Let's bring up the pitch to semitones and let's go up a whole step. Okay, so it'll be, let's play a section here. Let's go back to the original key. We can go down.
Bridge.
It's up to you. Whatever you want to do. But here's the kicker. This is the big problem that I have with warping. I'm going to unwarp everything and go original. Now, when you play back, it's really important to know where the limits of your machine is. What I mean by that is CPU usage. If it spikes, it could trigger a crash, it could trigger a glitch. It's very important that you understand how your machine can work and how much pressure you can put. If you have an M1 Mac, you might be able to push the limits a little more than an i7 Mac, okay? Look at the specs, look at your session, take a look at this when I press play right now with nothing warped.
1, 2.
My CPU spikes at 2.
Intro, 2.
That's nothing.
3.
That's
4.
very good. Now, I'm going to warp everything because if I wanted to change the key and I wanted to up the tempo. Okay, now what happens when I press play when everything is warped?
1, 2.
Spikes at 6%.
Intro.
Not
2,
so good.
3.
Now, it's not bad. It's still a low thing, but I like to keep it under 5. That's just personally. So just by having warp on one song, it spiked to 6%. If you have multiple songs and you have multiple things warped, the likelihood of your CPU spiking above 6% is very high. So in this case, this is the pros and cons that I'm talking about. There's a little more work on the back end, but in the long run, it will save a lot of trouble for you to do it this way. So let's say you want to change the key. Well, you only need to change the key on musical instruments. If you need the acoustic track on, make sure it's activated and it's selected and you have it warped. Let's change the key to step up. And now the only way to make sure that you can unwarp it is by consolidating it. So what's the consolidate shortcut? Command J. This is going to take a second, so let's wait. Now that that is done, I can unwarp it. Let's play it before we unwarp it. I want to make sure we're in the right key. Okay, now I'm going to select these warps, unwarp them. They should stay the same. Everything is unwarped. We're in the same key, and now the CPU is down to 2%. That is the workaround. It takes a little more time, but it's on the safe side of things. So I prefer safe. If you prefer efficiency, totally up to you. Again, as long as your computer, machine, whatever you're running Ableton off of, can handle the CPU usage, you're fine. I prefer to be on the safe side. So now that's one way of doing things. Here's the other way of doing things, and I'm gonna move quickly here. So when you put this in a session, you're gonna have to automate the master to the BPM that's there. Okay, this is 74. Now notice this red dot on the BPM now. That's telling you that you have automation on the master tempo. If you don't want to have to automate, then the other thing you can do is you can add an empty audio file at the very top, and I'll name this tempo. This is going to be the master tempo file. So you need an empty audio file. So I've made an empty audio called dummy tempo, and you assign it all the way through the end of the song. I want to make this 74 because that's the BPM of the song. If you want to assign this to 74 and you save this session, you can just drag it into a main session folder or Ableton session, and it'll automatically assign the tempo. You don't have to automate the master like you would in my way of doing things. I don't really like this way. The reason being is because everything must always be on warp to make this work. Check this out. So this is fine. Now I make this dummy tempo the lead track. That's the only difference.
Interlude.
Now, this grayed out because I'm telling this audio file to be the lead audio file for all the other files. So if all I have to do is raise this tempo. Now that's it. The Ableton main session changed to 96 because the lead audio file changed to 96. This only works, look at my CPU, it's spiked to 7. This only works if everything underneath it is warped. I personally do not like that, it stresses me out, which is the big reason why I don't do that. So I do a little more work on the back end of my main session for a set list, just to be on the safe side. You get to decide, that's the beauty of Ableton, you get to decide whatever you want to do. So this is how I save a song and format a song so that I drag it into a main session for a set list. I hope you learned something. Take whatever you want, leave whatever you want, do what's best for you. And let me know if you have any questions. I'll be glad to answer them. See you soon.